They did not drag him to a battlefield or a dungeon. They dragged him to a hill, a high, wind-struck hill, where the earth itself seemed to watch. The sky was grey, the air sharp, and the smell of pine and iron drifted through the cold morning mist. King Ælla of Northumbria expected execution. He expected humiliation. He expected death, but what he saw waiting for him was not a scaffold, and not a sword. It was an altar, carved from oak and smeared with dried blood and black ash. Runes had been burned into its surface, curling like serpents in the dim light. Beside it stood bowls of bone and iron hooks, polished with a reverence that did not belong to murder, but to worship. The Vikings did not speak at first. They formed a circle around him, cloaked in silence. Some held torches, some held blades, but all of them stared with one message in their eyes. This was not justice. This was ritual. Ælla's breathing quickened. For the first time he understood. These men were not here to kill his body. They were here to break his soul. At the edge of the circle, a figure stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in wolf fur. His expression was carved from ice. Ivar the Boneless, the son of Ragnar Lothbrok, the man whose father Ælla had thrown into a pit of snakes, and with a voice as calm as prayer, Ivar whispered, "You took his breath. Now the gods will take yours." Ælla looked at the altar again, and understood the horror. He would not die as a king. He would die as an offering. The blood eagle had begun. The blood eagle was never meant for common men. It was not a punishment for thieves or traitors or nameless prisoners. It was reserved for kings, for rulers who dared to defy the north, for those whose death needed to echo louder than their life, because Vikings understood something most kingdoms never did. Fear travels faster than armies. Killing Ælla with a sword would have ended a life. But carving him open under the sky, in a ritual that blurred the line between execution and sacrifice, would send a different message. This is what happens when you cross Ragnar's bloodline. The real battlefield was not Northumbria. It was memory. If Ælla died like this, then every king in Britain, in Ireland, in Frankish lands, would hear the story. And before they ever fought a Viking army, their courage would be half dead already. A sword kills a body. A legend kills resistance. And this ritual was not random cruelty. It had rules. Only dishonor could earn it. Only royal blood could satisfy it. And only suffering could prove the price was paid. The Vikings did not want Ælla's death to be quick. They wanted it unforgettable, because this was more than revenge. It was balance. Ragnar had been denied a noble warrior's death. No steel, no shield, no final blow. Instead, Ælla fed him to snakes, a mockery meant to erase his honor. Now, Ragnar's sons would erase Ælla's soul. If this ritual worked, if kings trembled before the north, then the great heathen army would not need to conquer by force. They would conquer through dread. This moment was not about one man dying. It was about the birth of Viking political terror. If you're ready for the backstory that leads into the ritual, before he was prey, Ælla was a predator. He was not a peaceful king, not a gentle ruler, and not a frightened man dragged into fate. He was ambitious, ruthless, and feared long before the Vikings ever set eyes on him. Ælla rose to the throne of Northumbria through force, not loyalty. He seized power in a kingdom already cracking under its own rivalries, and he ruled with iron, not trust. The nobles obeyed him, but they did not love him. The church used him, but did not respect him. His crown sat heavy, because it sat alone. And then Ragnar came, Ragnar Lothbrok, not just a raider, not just a warlord, but a living myth. To the English, he was a storm wearing human flesh. To the Norse, he was a man who refused to be ordinary. He did not raid only for gold. He raided for legacy. But Ælla saw only a foreign invader. When Ragnar was captured, Ælla had a choice. He could treat him as a warrior, or he could make him a warning. He chose humiliation, not a warrior's death, not an honorable duel. No spear, no blade, no pyre. Instead, a pit of venomous snakes, no prayer. No farewell, no dignity. The legend says Ragnar laughed as he died, whispering, "How the little pigs will grunt." When they hear how the old boar died, those little pigs were his sons, Halfdan Ubbe Sigurd, Björn Ironside, and Ivar, the coldest mind among them. They were not simply sons mourning a father. They were princes avenging a dynasty. What Ælla believed was a clever execution. The Vikings saw as an insult written across bloodlines. Their revenge would not be war, not siege, not ransom. It would be ritual, a punishment chosen not by men, but by the gods. When the great heathen army landed, it was not a raid, it was a reckoning. They did not strike for silver. They struck for a name, Ælla. The English expected chaos, but what came from the north was discipline, united banners, a single purpose, not plunder, punishment. Ælla tried to rally his allies, but loyalty built on fear collapses the moment fear changes direction. When word spread that Ragnar's sons were here not as raiders, but as avengers, men began to desert. Some slipped away at night. Some pretended illness. Some changed sides before the first blade was drawn. A king without followers is just a man holding metal. When the armies met near York, the battle ended quickly, not because Ælla was weak, but because his fate was already chosen. The Vikings didn't want him dead there. They wanted him alive. Ælla fled the battlefield, hoping for refuge behind stone walls, but the sons of Ragnar hunted him like wolves tracking a wounded stag. They cornered him, dragged him down, and stripped him not of clothing, but of majesty. No herald, no ceremony, no throne, just mud, chains, and a name that no longer frightened anyone. From the moment he was seized, the silence of his captors was terrifying. No insults, no gloating. Only cold purpose. They did not treat him as a prisoner. They treated him as an offering already promised. Each mile of the march north was a funeral he was forced to attend, his own. The further they traveled, the fewer human voices he heard. The army became quiet, almost reverent. Warriors who once laughed and shouted now walked as if entering a temple, because to them, they were, north in the distance, rose the sacred hills, the old ritual grounds, where oaths were carved into earth and vengeance became law. When Ælla saw the wooden platform and the carved altar waiting at its center, he understood. This was not execution. This was ceremony. Here death was not an ending, but a message to the living. Before the blades were even drawn, he was already conquered, not by swords, but by intent. He would not be killed. He would be remembered. The circle of warriors tightened. No one shouted. No one jeered. There was no drunken triumph, no battlefield frenzy. What surrounded Ælla was devotion. Torches were planted into the ground, forming a ring of fire around the altar. Priests, not soldiers, stepped forward first. Their faces were painted with ash and ochre, their hands marked with runes of judgment. This was not punishment. This was balance. Ælla was not treated as a criminal. He was treated as a sacrifice owed. Ivar stood before him in silence for a long time, letting him feel the weight of every watching eye, every held breath, every guard already listening. Then, with ritual calm, he asked the only question the gods required. Do you deny the death you gave? Ælla said nothing. There was nothing to deny. His silence was his sentence. They stripped him of his royal cloak. Not roughly, ritually, folding it as if burying a title. Then they laid him face down on the oak altar, its surface cold and stained with the memory of older offerings. The air thickened, not with violence, but with anticipation. A horn sounded, low, mournful, ancient. A call not to men, but to heaven. Two warriors stepped forward and placed their hands on Ælla's back, not restraining him, holding him for the gods. The priests began to chant in Old Norse, voices rising and falling like waves, a call to Odin, a witness to vengeance. A door opening between worlds. In that moment it was not cruelty. It was liturgy. Then the blades were brought forward, not crude axes. Ceremonial knives, iron consecrated in winter rites, edges polished to mirror light. The chanting grew deeper. Ælla tensed. The first cut was not meant to kill. It was meant to open, to mark flesh the way runes mark stone, a line across the back. Then another. Then deeper, the chanting never stopped. The blood did not spill like in battle. It flowed, guided by slow, deliberate hands, as if the priests were carving not a man but a doorway. The sacred faded, and the horror began. The knives pressed deeper, carving past skin, past muscle, shaping a path to bone. The sound changed. From flesh to rib, from cutting to cracking, Ælla bit down on his grief and terror. For a king to scream was a second death, the death of dignity. The ribs were separated one by one, methodical, reverent, merciless. He was still alive, still aware, still conscious. The north wind carried away the steam rising from his back. The priests' voices rose, prayer becoming thunder. This was the moment where the sacred transformed into spectacle, not for the crowd, but for memory. Because the blood eagle was not meant to be watched, it was meant to be remembered, and the final terror had not even begun. The chanting shifted, deeper now, heavier, no longer calling the gods, but presenting the offering. Ælla could no longer see the sky, but he could feel every detail of what they were doing to him. Cold air flooding freshly opened flesh, blood running down his sides in slow, burning streams. The priests stepped back. Now the sons of Ragnar stepped forward. This was no longer religion. This was vengeance wearing sacred robes. Ivar placed a hand on the altar. Not on Ælla, on the wood, as though to steady the world before he broke it. He spoke softly, almost like a eulogy. A storm for a storm. A father for a father. Then the executioners returned, not with knives now, but with hooks, iron, curved, silent. They slid the hooks beneath the ribs, expertly, as if rehearsed by generations, and began to pull them outward. Not a tear, not a rip. A slow unfurling, like a grotesque blooming of bone. The ribs opened like a cage, unlatched from the inside. The onlookers did not shout. They bowed their heads, because this was the moment a soul was believed to be exposed to the sky. Once the bones had been spread wide, the ritual was not finished, not until the lungs were drawn forward. Draped out of the cavity like wings, the eagle was not poetry. It was anatomy. Ælla was still breathing, shallow, shuddering, alive long enough to feel himself turned into a symbol. In Norse belief, a warrior's soul leaves through the lungs, through breath. To pull the lungs outward was to make his soul visible as it left his body. This was why screaming was forbidden. Screaming was breath wasted. Breath was the last offering. Ivar leaned close, so only Ælla could hear. This is not your death. Your death was when you chose dishonor. This is simply the gods collecting the debt. The snow began to fall, thin flakes drifting through torchlight, white upon red. There was no plea, no last bargain. Only the silence of a king unmade. Ælla did not die as a ruler. He died as a warning. The blood eagle was complete. The ritual did not end when Ælla's breath faded. His body itself became the message. The Vikings did not bury him. They did not burn him. They displayed him, ribs spread, lungs unfurled, so that every warrior, every scout, every trembling survivor who dared look upon him would carry the story outward like wildfire, because fear is a courier. When the English survivors fled, they did not escape defeat. They delivered it to the rest of Britain. Whispers became reports. Reports became panic. Panic became prophecy. The sons of Ragnar do not kill kings. They break them. No cleric dared wash the altar. No soldier dared claim the body. Even Ælla's own men looked upon what was left of him and believed, this is what happens when the gods take vengeance personally. His corpse became a sermon. Across Northumbria, warlords who once boasted of resisting the north now weighed their courage against their lungs, and courage lost. Entire villages surrendered before seeing a single Viking ship. Some kingdoms paid tribute without negotiation. Some nobles swore loyalty before steel was ever drawn. The Blood Eagle had done what no siege could achieve. It conquered without a battle, because kingdoms fall, not when walls break, but when will breaks. Before Ælla, Vikings were feared as raiders. After Ælla, they were feared as consequences. This was not just a death, it was a broadcast, delivered through terror, repeated through rumour, carved into the memory of every throne in Britain. Ælla's screaming absence became a political force, not a corpse. A warning, and long after the torches burned out and the ritual hill fell silent, something far more dangerous remained. The knowledge that Ragnar's vengeance had no borders. The blood eagle did not stay on the hilltop. It spread, carried by fear, like smoke carried by wind. What Ragnar's sons understood, and what Ælla never did, is that terror does not need an army to travel. It only needs a story, and the story of the king who died with his ribs open to the sky crossed borders faster than any ship. It reached Mercia. It reached Wessex. It reached the Frankish coast. Even the courts of the Carolingians whispered it in candlelit corridors. Kings began to measure threats differently. A raid could cost gold. A war could cost land. But the blood eagle, that could cost legacy monarchs, could not allow themselves to be remembered as offerings, so many of them chose. Negotiation before defiance. Viking diplomacy was born from Viking terror. It became a geopolitical weapon. Single ritual replaced 100 battles. A single corpse replaced a campaign. Season 1. King's agony became the price of deterrence, and something else changed, even deeper. The image of the Vikings shifted in the mind of Europe. Before Ælla, they were pirates. After Ælla, they were harbingers. Not merely men with swords, but messengers of a world where gods still demanded blood. To Christian scribes, this was demonic. To Norse warriors, it was justice made visible. Ragnar's sons did not just avenge a father. They restored a myth, the belief that kings are not beyond consequence and thrones cannot shield dishonor. Ælla's death became a template. From then on, rulers facing the north did not ask, "Can we win?" They asked, "Will they spare me?" And in that shift, that quiet dread, the Vikings gained something more valuable than land. They gained obedience without battle. A corpse turned into foreign. Policy. Next comes the final closing hook, a haunting ending that leaves the audience thinking long after the video ends. If you are ready for the closing reflection, long after the body rotted and the bones were taken by weather and time, the message stayed. Ælla's kingdom fell. His throne passed into other hands. His banners vanished from memory, but his death survived him. More people remember how he died than how he ever ruled. That is the final power of the blood eagle, not the pain, not the spectacle, not even the revenge, but the erasure. It stripped a king of what kings fear losing most, the story told about them after they are gone. Vikings understood a truth most rulers never grasped. Man is not defeated when he falls. He is defeated when memory stops fearing him. Ælla's punishment was never meant to end with his heartbeat. It was meant to echo, and it did. For centuries afterward, lords and kings across Britain ruled with one shadow behind them. Not a sword, not a siege tower, but a hill where a king's ribs once opened to the sky as a reminder that thrones are fragile. And divine vengeance has a price. Whether the gods were watching that day, no one can prove. But every king who heard the story acted as if they were, because in the end, the blood eagle was never meant to kill a body. It was meant to kill the illusion that power could protect anyone from consequence.